My next lesson, so it's still 10-3 and we're learning about solving trig equations. So solving trig equations, so few more examples on solving. Let's look that up. Okay, so if you want to follow along, I'm on page number 644. So this is example number 4. Okay, it's the same thing. You just have to isolate x and then you need to take inverse of that function to find the missing angle. So today I'll show you quadratic types. So all different type of quadratic type of trig functions. So quadratic type. So the function itself will be a quadratic function. So every time there's a quadratic equation, I hope you remember we always factor that out. We can do x factoring, quadratic formula, greatest common factor. Whichever way works, we just do that. So example number 4, I have 2 sine square x sine x minus 1 and it's equal to 0, and the interval is 0 to 2 pi, which is 0 all the way to less than 360. All right. Okay, so since it's quadratic, so I could factor this out. X factoring could be one thing I could do. If you're getting confused with this trig function in here, so the easier way is you could always replace this trig function with a different variable. Like I would just say this is y. So I would rewrite this as 2y to the second, just y, minus 1, it's equal to 0. And once I'm done factoring, I'll bring back my original trig variable. So let's x factor this. I hope you remember AC on the top, B down here. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2 and negative 1 down here. Okay, two numbers multiplied to negative 2 added to negative 1. So what are those two numbers? So I have negative 2 and 1. And again, if this number is different than 1, so after getting these numbers here for x factoring, we divide each number by the a value. Try simplifying. If I simplify the first one, it's negative 1. Second one, it's not possible to simplify. So my factor is going to be y minus 1. Second one would be, we put y with the bottom number, so it's going to be 2y plus 1 and it's equal to 0. Now replace this variable with the trig function. So y itself is sine. So sine x minus 1. This would be 2 sine x plus 1. And now once I get these factors, pretty much solving is just setting each factor equal to 0 and just solve each one separately. First one is sine x minus 1 is equal to 0. The second one is sine x plus 1 is equal to 0. Solve each one. This is sine x is equal to 1. This would be sine x is equal to negative 1/2. Now, this is just like you have two different equations to solve. Basically, based off their signs, you need to figure out what quadrant it's in, and then based off that, you need to figure out the answer. So, sine x is equal to 1. And I hope you remember, anytime sine cosine has a value of 1 or 0, those going to be definitely quadrantal angles. And again, you can look at this graph like, you know, quadrantal angles. 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. So here's the coordinate point would be 1, 0. This one would be 0, 1. This one would be negative 1, 0. This is 0 and negative 1. All right. So I'm looking at sine. And again, so you needed to know this information from your trig class. So I hope you remember. So the first number is your cosine value. Second number is the sine value. So I'm looking at sine for 1. So at what angle sine has 1 value? Sine is 1 at 90 degree. Yep, that's one of the answer. Is there any other? Nope, there's no other option. So my answer would be 90 degrees. There you go. There's no other option. So that's all I have for my first factor. Second one, sine x is equal to negative 1/2. And again, if you remember, I told you just ignore the sign in the first place. So I know sine is 1/2 at 30 degrees. Then we'll figure out the quadrant. So sine has negative ratio, means it's possible in third and fourth quadrant. So third quadrant, it would be the reference angle, so means we add it to 180, so my answer would be 210. Third quadrant, we take away from 360, so this is going to be 330. Here you go. So that's what I have for my first example. Let me show you one more. This is example number 5. I have 2 sine square x plus 3 cosine x minus 3, and it's equal to 0. Okay, this is another quadratic type, but the problem is it's not one trig function. Always keep in mind, in order to do quadratic type, you have to have entire trig equation into one trig function. If it's not in terms of one trig function, you have to do something to make it into one trig function. So what I see is, I see sine square here, I see cosine here, which is 2 different types, right? So either you gotta replace sine with cosine, or you gotta replace cosine with sine. So either or. But okay, try calling Pythagorean identities. I hope you remember the first one was, so sine square is equal to 1 minus cosine square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this function, this sine function, with 1 minus cosine square x. The reason I would do it, because I need to change everything in terms of cosine. Okay, almost there. Now I see mostly cosine in here, so pretty much it's just simplifying. So let's distribute cosine square x. 3 cosine x minus 3 is equal to 0. Combine like terms, I have negative 2 cosine square x, 3 cosine x, and minus 1. It's equal to 0. And okay, now, normally we try to keep square term positive. If it's not that easy to deal with the negative x squared term. So what I'm going to do is, just to make this term positive, I'm just going to move everything to other side. So once I move everything to other side, this is going to be 2 cosine squared x, would be 3 cosine x. Oh, this is cosine x. And plus 1, so you can put it equal to 0, which is same as putting equal to 0 on this side. Either or, it's fine. Now, once I see quadratic type, so you can replace that with another variable, or I'm just going to do x factoring right away. AC, 2 times 1, 2, negative 3. Two numbers multiply to 2, added to negative 3. So I have negative 2 and negative 1. Then we divide. If A is other than 1, yes, we divide. Try simplifying. So first factor going to be cosine x minus 1. Second one would be 2 cosine x minus 1, and both equal to 0. Now pretty much you just have to set each one equal to 0. So I have cosine x minus 1 equal to 0. 2 cosine x minus 1 is equal to 0. Solve each one. This is cosine x is equal to 1. This is cosine x is equal to 1/2. Almost there. This one, again, cosine is equal to 1. So it means it's going to be a quadrantal angle. So try calling 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. First number cosine, second sine. Cosine is 1. Cosine is 1 at 0 degrees, and there's none, and 360. But since based off the interval, 360 is not acceptable, so my only answer for this factor would be 0 degrees so far. Second one, cosine is 1/2. Cosine is 1/2 at 60 degrees. Then cosine has positive ratio, which is possible in first and fourth quadrant. So 60 works for first quadrant, and if it's fourth quadrant, it's going to be 360 minus 60, which is 300. All right. So that's how we do it. So that's pretty much all for today. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.